Cool.
Oh, okay, we're live. Okay. Hi,
Great.
James.
Hi.
Oh my God. Hi, James.
Thank you
Welcome
so much for having
eventually.
me, Grace. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
I feel like I've been stalking you since our LinkedIn Top Voice newsletter launched, and I feel like you have created some really cool content in the data space, and especially I feel like the data visualization piece is like extremely cool. And then your content is also like very short form. I think the first data visualization guest we had was like Three Blue One Brown. He have done a good job on like, visualizing math, but you're visualizing like data in general. Like I remember seeing like I feel like recently I saw like the Coke and Pepsi one. It was like really interesting because like in people's mind, like most people think like Coke is like the dominant player. But like Pepsi is like growing like a lot faster and stuff. So it's like
Exactly.
really crazy to see.
Exactly. I mean, I think the thing about the most important thing when you look at data and you explore data is to
Mhm,
understand the human connection that people have with those stories, those data stories that we're trying to tell. So
mhm,
everybody knows who Coke is. Everybody knows about Pepsi.
mhm,
And that's what's important because you instantly think you have that kind of memory. Like I remember my mum taking me to the supermarket, um,
mhm,
and afterwards we'd sit in this cafe and we would share a can of Coke. I have a memory of that. I mean, I don't really
mhm,
drink Coke anymore, but I do have that memory, and so it's a tangible thing that's in your mind, and that's so true because you don't really. I mean, I don't know about the US. I think the US Pepsi is probably a bit bigger, but here in Switzerland, where I'm based, you don't really see Pepsi that often. You see a lot of Coke, but not a lot of Pepsi. You tend to assume, wow, Coke's Coke's a global brand.
mhm,
Coke is the number one seller of Coke.
mhm. Oh,
Um,
Coke.
and, but then you look at Pepsi, and actually Pepsi's different because yeah, they create Coke, their own version of it, but
Mhm,
at the same time they have this very successful wider business.
mhm,
And so there is that kind of like contradiction in your mind. So you have this kind of perception of Coca-Cola dominance, when in reality, as a business, Pepsi's actually pretty strong because
mhm,
it's diversified out of the drinks business, and it,
mhm,
it, it makes cookies and does all kinds of things. So
mhm,
that's a technique that you use. So if you tell a story that's unbelievable, uh, people tend to listen because it's so cool.
mhm,
And that's a classic example of using storytelling to communicate about a business where you are defying almost rationale. You're defying expectations, and that's what gets you attention. And I think that's key because on social media you have a couple of seconds to get people's attention, like
mhm,
literally a few seconds. It's a fast thinking game. People don't really like they don't they don't have the ability to concentrate for a long period of time on a social media platform like they would if they were reading a
mhm,
book. So when you're on social media like LinkedIn, you've literally got 2 seconds to grab attention, and then only then can you like tell what you need to say. And I
mhm,
think that was the idea with the Coke
mhm,
and Pepsi thing. It was to raise awareness. Like when you look at a stock, you can often be emotionally involved in that stock when you invest,
mhm,
and you can ignore the actual fundamentals behind it. And the fundamentals behind Coca-Cola are fantastic, but Pepsi, it's a hidden gem, and it's a stock that a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought of if they were to compare the two.
mhm. Okay, I want to give a quick shout out to like the CM of Pepsi was on our show like before, and he's such a charismatic guy. I feel like Pepsi really innovate in the marketing game. Like so like he I met him like in the NFT era, and then like I feel like they have been like so like leaning onto like the new technology, the newest trend, and like they are always having like a lot of really creative campaigns. Like Pepsi like do a lot of collaborations with like Peeps or like some other stuff that are like extremely creative. And then like you mentioned, like when you think about Coke, maybe like Coke is like just like one single line of product. And there's so much product under the Pepsi umbrella, like the chips or just like not like the
Yeah,
Nvidia chips, but like
that's
it's
the
like the actual chips, like potato chips. So there's like a lot of stuff.
Coca-Cola's pretty diverse. They have other drinks, but
Yeah,
huge, absolutely
huge.
huge.
For sure. I want to just like dive a little bit deeper into like your background. Like, so, I know that you were like a finance writer and you were working in these like asset management firms, and like, you know, how did you started like creating content on LinkedIn, since like that's how we met? And like I feel like, yeah, like, and then a lot of people among your like, you know, 150K
I
audience
thought, how
probably
did okay,
want to know about who you are.
this is a funny one actually. So, I mean, yes, would have to go back to 2016 because that's probably when it started. Um, Basically, I was an investment writer for a big Swiss bank, earning a nice Swiss salary, which was
Mhm,
pretty good, pretty good. Um,
mhm,
and I had this one problem. My problem was that I didn't know if anyone was reading what I was writing. So I was
mhm,
this investment writer, and I was supposed to write about the markets and talk about the economy, write about the economy, and I had no feedback. I mean, when
mhm,
I say feedback, I mean I was getting feedback from the portfolio managers and the analysts and
mhm,
and senior management and the CIO, and
mhm,
I was getting feedback from them. But to be honest with you, they don't really matter. The people
mhm,
who really matter are the investors.
mhm,
And I had no connection with the investors. I didn't know if they were reading what I was writing. And so I decided I want to find out if what I'm writing is any good. So at the time, I wrote and linked an article. Now, back then, I wasn't very social media savvy. I wasn't really. I kind of knew about Facebook, but wasn't really using it. Instagram
mhm,
was history to me completely. Is well, probably still is, to be
mhm,
honest. And Twitter never
mhm,
used that. I mean, back then that is. But LinkedIn was accessible. LinkedIn was, it's a professional. It had the kind of air of respectability, and I thought, let me try that.
mhm,
I'll try that. So I wrote an article, and it was basically an absolute disaster. Um, it turns out I was a really bad writer, and,
mhm,
and it was my job to write. So I was earning this nice Swiss salary and adding absolutely no value to this company, and that was really depressing. I mean, what I was writing was grammatically correct. I was spelling
mhm,
things correctly, and but it was just really boring. And I realized that, when I read it back, what I wrote, maybe writing about Fed policy change is a bit boring to most normal people outside of my industry.
mhm,
um, and so that was my kind of awakening moment. I want to get people to listen to me.
mhm,
Um, and I don't want to be this investment professional, this investment writer. I want to
mhm.
be someone that people listen to, like that,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
respect.
Mhm,
So I went on this huge big journey, and I started exploring marketing, which was a total mystery to me at the time. Learning about people like Simon Sinek and all these fantastic
mhm,
marketing gurus, and I took the wisdom that I could from them, and I experimented with so many different types of things over the years. And I left that company a long time ago. I moved on, and I tried video, I tried all different types of things. And sure enough, my writing improved a lot, and I started building an audience.
mhm,
But the real game changer probably happened when during COVID. So I
mhm,
had an email from a client, and they said, "How do you do this?" And he sent me a link to a YouTube video of a racing bar chart, and I just looked at it and went, "I have no idea. I don't know how they do this. I've never seen anything like this before, but it's really cool." And
mhm,
so I went out there and tried to figure it out. And so I figured out that it's been done in JavaScript. So, well, okay, let's figure out JavaScript. So
mhm,
when I was a teenager, I used to code in Java, and I did a bit of C, and it was a hobby. It was a kind of a geeky teenager thing, which I
mhm,
did for a few years and then forgot. Like when I went to university, studied
mhm,
economics, forgot about coding. Turns out that the technology these days is just phenomenally good compared to what it
mhm,
was when I was a teenager. If you need to code now, it's
mhm,
so much easier. Like the
mhm,
tool, everything is just so much easier. Like I remember when I was a teenager, you'd write code, run it through a compiler, and then hit an error, and then you'd be spending hours just staring at a screen, trying to figure out where did I go wrong. But nowadays you have all these tools that make it accessible. So I found out I can actually code quite well, which was a surprise to me. And JavaScript was weirdly logical, even though it's ugly. I mean, I don't really like JavaScript, but as a coding language, I could get around it. And so
mhm,
that's how it started. I created a data visualization, but by then I didn't want to create just a data visualization
mhm,
because I looked at all these data visualizations done by these data scientists, and they looked really boring. They looked like the way that I was writing, when I was working in the finance industry. And so what I did was I started coding And I thought, well, I'm a storyteller now. I'm not what I used to be. I want to tell the story. I want to make people go, wow, oh wow, that's amazing. And that's what I did. So I started telling stories. Um, and that is it just blew up. Basically, people just went crazy in my industry. So suddenly everybody started asking me things like, what's he doing? How's he doing this? Like, how can we do this? Like, what is he doing that we're not doing? And that essentially is how I started to build my business. So I started, started getting a lot of, mainly from the financial sector. So banks, asset managers, wealth managers, insurance companies, they started contacting me, say, we like what you do. People, my clients watch your videos, and we want you to do the same for us. We want you to come in, maybe teach us or advise us on how to make good content, not just video, but everything, not just data visualization, but everything. And so that's what happened. I started, I'm now a keynote speaker. I do talks. I also consult a lot. I help them understand. Look, this is what you're doing. This is why no one's listening to you. And that comes before the sexy data visualizations. That's what you need to do. And I make data visualizations. I tell data stories. And in the finance sector, because there's so much data, and we tend to communicate in that way, it just made perfect sense to a lot of people. And so that's basically where I started from. That was my story, from realizing that now I'm actually quite a good writer. I wasn't a good writer back then, but now I learned a few things, and I got lots of help from people to teach me how to write properly.
No, I want to say hi to. By the way, I want to say hi to Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Jessica is our manager. But anyway, keep going.
No worries. So that's basically my story. How I started off. I had this kind of awakening, pivotal moment in my life, my career, and I would love to say that it was a linear progression. It wasn't. It was zigzaggy. But I found my calling, and that is data visualization.
I wonder, so in terms of like, creating content, you have to consume a lot of content. Well, I guess like there's three pieces of the question. One is like when you started, like, you mentioned about like you started trying to find ways to make more compelling content, and you landed on like JavaScript and then like leveraging Java to actually create these like short graphs. We should probably dive into how you are creating that, and then
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we can talk about other questions
All
later.
right. So in short, okay, what I learned was that when you're dealing with big data sets,
Yeah.
there's kind of three phases. First of all, getting data.
Mm.
So number one, get as much data as you can.
Mhm.
Next part, I mean, it's a bit like you kind of try to imagine you're an explorer. First of all, you need a map,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
map is the data. You want the biggest map possible because you can see all the potential
yeah.
world. You want the whole world at your fingertips. And
Mhm.
that's essentially what you're doing. You're acquiring data, trying to get data, as much potentially interesting data as possible. The next part is exploration. So once you have that data, you need to explore the data. You need to go into it. You need to
Mhm.
search it, and you can do that. It doesn't matter how you do it. I use all kinds of things. I'm using Excel, Tableau, Python. But I'm using any tool that I can in order to try and find the story in that data set that's
Mhm.
compelling. And then part of that exploration process is to design the story. So the story that you're thinking about is that's kind of the third step. How do I communicate this? What I found. So the communication part is probably the most vital part and the hardest part to pull off. And that is, first of all, why does anyone care what I'm showing them? So
Mhm.
you could show like a data visualization of banana prices,
Mhm.
but if the average person doesn't care about that, then why produce it? It may be interesting to you, but it's not interesting to anyone else, and it's not meaningful to anyone else. So that's the last part is the communication, how you communicate it, and that's complex because you have a number of things that you need to do. First of
Mhm.
all, you need to, and this is what I do. I get a pad of paper, and I write at the top of the pad of paper, why should they care? Why should anyone care about this? And that's the hardest part because you're thinking, all right, Pepsi Cola, why should people care? Because everyone has drunk Pepsi or Cola, and some people like it, and if they don't, it's recognizable. and it's kind of interesting. And the reason why they'll find this interesting is because it defies expectations. You know,
Mhm.
most people assume Pepsi's below Coke
Mhm.
as a business in terms of size. So that's okay. What's the emotion?
Like finding the conflict of the
Yeah.
story, kind of.
So if you think like film industry, this is your act two. If you want drama, you need conflict,
Mhm.
right? So that's what you're doing. You're setting the scene. You're in your act two. Then you're
Mhm.
building it up and the final resolution is Pepsi shooting out in Act Three is shooting through the roof and
Mhm.
overtaking Coke. So yes, and that's basically it. But you also have to have that emotion, because you can have a fantastic film on TV that's won awards, but it's just boring to you because you're just
Mhm.
not interested in the sci-fi, for instance,
Mhm.
so you have to have that emotional connection. So Pepsi Cola is nostalgia, 100%
Mhm.
nostalgia. Like I mentioned, I don't actually drink Coke anymore. I
Mhm.
stopped. I, it's not really healthy for you, and
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean I don't drink it occasionally. It doesn't mean I don't have fond memories of it. There's a nostalgia factor, so
Mhm.
there's that part added into it. So
Wow,
and
I didn't thought you would go that deep. I know there's a conflict and it's like a well-known brand that people care about, but like I didn't think about the nostalgia part, because I feel like that's really important for the Gen Z audience. Like I've scrolling on TikTok, everyone is going after the 90s like aesthetic, like basically like the style and stuff. But yeah.
no, you have to. I mean, that's what makes something potentially go viral.
Mhm.
That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, let's talk about how to go viral. Like, you're
That's it. That's how
unpacking.
you do it. I mean,
Yeah,
you
okay.
connect with the audience. If you want something to go viral, connect with as many people as possible. You don't personally. I don't always want to go viral. Sometimes I'm quite targeted at who I'm aiming something towards. But if you want to create something viral, it has to be something that everyone resonates with and has an emotional connection to. So I mentioned, like, you know, earlier, I think in the description I just wrote about why
Mhm.
I'm talking to you today. I mentioned that,
Uh,
why do I believe that data visualization can save humanity? The,
mhm,
the big problem we have today is that there's just too much data,
mhm,
right? There's so much data, and we as a human species are not designed for the world that we've created. Um, we were hunters and gatherers for hundreds of thousands of
mhm.
years, and now suddenly we're expected to be data scientists overnight. We're not designed for the world. And what data visualization does is it taps into our humanity.
Mhm,
As human beings, we're visual people, we're storytellers. Like before the written word, we had the oral tradition where fathers and sons and mothers and daughters would tell each other stories over campfires, and that was how we communicated for hundreds of thousands of years. And these days, it's part of our DNA to tell a story. That's why we have a film industry. That's why we have books and novels. We never really gave that up, and we never will. But data visualization is part of that. It's a way of telling a story using by visually looking at data, by visually seeing the image. And conflict is a very important part of it. Drama, conflict. You need conflict if you want drama, and if you and you need drama if you want to tell it. I mean, you need it if you want to tell a good story. So those all come into it. And if you want to make something go viral, then you need to tap into all those emotions and tap heavily into the storytelling. Um, and I think the other thing to mention, I would say also, which is really important, when when you're on a social media platform like LinkedIn,
mhm,
people behave differently. So
mhm,
there's this kind of misconception that concentration spans are shrinking. I actually don't believe this. I think this is rubbish.
mhm,
I think that people still read books, people
mhm,
still study and go do their degrees, and people can still
mhm,
focus. It's just when you're on social media, your brain is working differently. You have a thinking fast brain and you have a thinking slow brain. And people on social media, they're flying through their feeds. They're thinking fast, they're thinking emotionally, and they're thinking like the stock market is over the short run. In the short run, stock markets are very
mhm,
volatile because they're emotional, and people are emotional on social media. And so sometimes you can see people will say the craziest things on a social
mhm,
media platform, which they wouldn't say in normal life. And so I think that's the important thing. You need to tap that. You need to respect that. So if you're posting on LinkedIn, don't post that I went to a conference event and I feel privileged to have been there. No one's going to find that boring. But if you write something like went to a conference event and realize that there are X number of penguin species out there, and the one and I never, I don't know, I'm just making something up, and actually, if we're not careful, there will be something, I don't know, like, you know what I mean, like if you're trying to appeal to penguin lovers or something. I've just used a really bad example there, but that's the point I'm trying to make. So you have I think the trick is to try and find those kind of emotional points. Like you look at the world right now, what are people really worried about? What do they really care about right now? What is it that really bothers them? So US debt. If I put US debt up there, I know I'm going to get a reaction because it's an election year in the US. And that is a key part of that's a key area of contention and debate in the United States. So I know that if I put US debt rising or data visualization, US debt rising, is going to go viral. And I actually did that last week and it went viral. So that's just to give you an example.
I wonder, what does your content that look like? And then how do you, so like, since I know that like you mentioned about like the US debt thing, like I feel like you post a lot about the US, but you live in the Switzerland. And like, how do you kind of like filter out what is resonating with your audience? And then is your audience just like general in the English speaking country, or do you feel like they're centered towards the US or UK or kind of like other places in the world? And how do you kind of pick what to, you mentioned a couple things in there, like the nostalgia, something that people care about, something people have strong conflicting emotions about. Is there something else that you're like hunting down after? And then what's your information dialogue like to kind of
I'm hunting down business. I'm
hunt down business? Taking
at the end
notes.
of the day, my clients are going to come from, they're going to come from, a lot of them are going to come from the US, and a lot of them do, because the US is the largest Anglophone economy on the planet. It's the largest economy, and that's where the businesses are based. So the US is an important source of business for me. And that's why I have a focus on the US. I will focus on US macro stories, likewise for the UK, and to a lesser extent, certain countries in Europe. So there is a tilt towards that, and that is strategic because that's where my business is based. And those are the people I need to contact and communicate with. So I need to communicate with my clients properly, and I need to address issues that they care about. So it's not that I'm picking the US because I have nothing else better to do. I'm picking the US because there are people there that I need to communicate with, and those are potential businesses and leads that I get. So it's about taking advantage of the scalability of the internet. So if you imagine, right, if I shoot a video like this and I post it on LinkedIn, and I don't know, 30,000 people watch the video, that basically means I've just had a conversation with 30,000 people in 24 hours, which I couldn't do on the telephone in the past. And that's the power and the scalability of the internet. It's that ability to communicate really effectively, like en masse, but also in a very targeted way to a particular audience. And so when I'm developing my stories, I am thinking, what would a person in New York, for instance, care about right now? What would a person in London care about right now? What would a person here? See, I create these kind of personas of people and try to understand what it is that they care about, and try to create data visualizations that meet those needs, that fit into those emotions.
I wanted to learn more about like, on the business side, you mentioned that like you have some clients who are assuming they're like, oh, financial institutions or something. Like, can you kind of describe like the business side of things? And then maybe like I'll selfishly ask some question about marketing for
Sure.
companies as well.
Not sure if I can mention their names, but
Oh yeah, of course. Like just like the
if you go on LinkedIn
vibe
profile,
of the business, I guess.
those big institutions are. But I would say like you want to know basically what it's
Like
like to
the
work.
type of I mean, yeah, how does like I guess like maybe tell us more about your business. Maybe it's also like a good marketing funnel for you too. So for people who
Oh,
may
yeah.
not like familiar with.
So I don't actively go out and search for clients.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference, I guess, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of social media and marketing
Mhm.
and digital marketing. So my clients come to me, they see my
Mhm.
content, they love it, and they contact me,
Mhm.
and that is literally how all my business has been created.
Mhm.
So I'm not.
Congratulations.
Well, I mean that it's the best way.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's the most scalable way. I use that kind of example of 30,000 people having a conversation with 30,000 people. Over those, out of those 30,000 people, you might get, I don't know, 100 leads, and out of those 100 leads, you might get a client.
Mhm.
So it's a very effective way of creating what we call inbound marketing.
Do
And
people ask you to like create a video for them, or would it be like, "Hey, can you like tell us how we should run our content?" That's like more leaning
both.
towards.
So it depends. So
Okay,
some clients, particularly the larger institutions, they have very large marketing teams, and they just want to drop me into a marketing plan somewhere.
got it.
You know,
Yeah.
and they drop me in there, and I do my and they tell me what to create, and I create it. Other teams, other groups, it's much more. We want your expertise. We want you to talk to the portfolio manager or analyst. We want you to come in, and we want your experience as well, and we want you to help us promote it.
Mhm.
So I would say it's a bit of both.
What do you say? Like, I guess, like, for since I live in the Silicon Valley, a lot of the listeners are like VCs or startup founders or even like LPs sometimes. And I wonder how should they think about their content strategy? Um, let's say if like you're running a small VC fund, how do you think about like stand out among the crowd out of, this like a
Oh, I have
billion
a very
CL
simple answer.
of venture
First of all,
capital? Yeah.
if you're a VC, your whole objective should be to be cash flow positive. If your
Yeah.
business model is never going to be cash flow positive, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
So I think I have conversations with VCs all the time, and they kind of look at you and think, "Oh, you're the silver bullet. If I do this, it goes viral, and then suddenly we've got more business and we'll do really well." It doesn't really work like that. That's the reality. So I think the 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 first thing to do is to really think about really, is your business model viable, and will it
I
ever
guess,
generate?
like, for VCs, I don't think it has, like, the cash flow positive, um, aspect of things since, like, I feel
No,
like the
because you
model
got a J
is
curve.
good.
You're in a J curve, right? And you're
Yeah.
burning through cash. But that's also really dangerous because um, you can get into this kind of situation where you're burning cash. You've got a vision, but you haven't actually figured how to actually make that vision work in a tangible business way, that a way that actually works. So, I think content wise, if you first of all, what you need to be is visible. So you may have the best business in the world and best idea in the world, and it may be full of potential, but if no one knows about it, you'll never grow, you'll never succeed. So you need people to know that you exist. So if you are a founder and you're in the VC space, it is your job to communicate. You cannot say, I don't have time for marketing, or I don't have time for this, or I'm too
So, I
busy,
guess
too
if
worried.
you're
You
running a VC fund, how would you like, what data would you like, what data visualization would you create to kind of, like, attract what type of audience, and what would be the story that you're trying to tell to attract?
it depends it depends what you're trying to do. So, uh, if a VC fund is a bit different. So if we're talking about VC funds, um,
Yeah.
that's dipping into the asset management world, and there it's a little tricky because you're in the private market realm. So in private markets, there's less data. You're probably not going to be able to tell data stories based upon on what essentially private markets or private assets that you're
Mhm.
investing in. But if you step out of that and you think about what are the themes that those investments are being made into, so say for
Mhm.
example AI, there's tons of VCs in the, right? You don't talk
Mhm.
about the VC, you talk about AI, and you look
Mhm.
at, and you may tell a story that's completely unrelated to your business, not unrelated, but not, it's not about your business, it's about the story of AI.
Mhm.
And often what you'll find is that if you structure your communication that way, you'll end up discovering why you matter and why
Mhm.
you as a business should exist.
Mhm.
Like for example, how could AI be used in the pharmaceutical industry to discover the optimal type of molecule for a particular disease? I'm just phrasing
Mm.
it, right. You go and you create a data visualization based on that, and then you discover, oh, that's the reason why I need to exist, because I'm the company that's going to deliver that. And just by creating that buzz on that topic, people
Mhm.
associate you as the expert on that topic. And that association of expertise and visibility is what will eventually drive business for you, if you're constantly doing it. Um,
What would be your kind of like content diet to educate yourself in a particular space? And for like the graphs, so obviously you're creating a lot of graph. How like what kind of data do you need as a foundation to create like the the popular graphs? Like would this be like also you also write like a major um like large like body of content about like a specific subject. um for example, I'm just looking at like your like one of your like a week ago you posted something really big on the US government debt. I wonder like how do you find out, well, like obviously these are like over the news,
my
like
area of
what would be,
expertise.
yeah,
So
how do you like find the things that will be relevant to the audience? Like, would you be one of the people who like use like a tracker to rank, let's call it like New York Times most read it article, and then like convert that into the story? Or would it be like you think generally, I think this would make sense, like just like an instinct gut check to be like, okay, let's just go with this. As like a as a content creator, how do you kind of like using data in your corner to like create content?
I mean, I think there's the what I try to do when
Mhm,
I'm trying to come up with an idea.
mhm,
So you used you mentioned like a macro story like US
mhm.
government debt. I'm going to have a view on
Microstrategy.
that because that's my background. But if
Mhm,
I was to go into a topic that I'm not less familiar with it, I do what anyone else does. I explore
mhm,
and I try and find out. And part of that exploration process is also trying to understand what makes people think, what's getting people wound up right now. And
mhm,
there's no real kind of, I'm not using an algorithm. I'm not trying to test sentiment over particular topics. I'm going out there and just testing the water. Where's the debate happening on Twitter or X,
mm,
call it now?
mhm,
Like, what's got people riled up, or or what could get people riled up,
mhm,
or those are the kind of questions you ask. So I wouldn't say that there's a deeply structured way of trying to figure things out. You go in with an idea, you test it, and you continue
mhm,
to test those ideas in your mind. And so I th- I don't think that you know I will use literally everything and anything I can to come up with ideas. I'll bounce. I mean, it's actually not that difficult to come up with ideas.
mhm,
Ideas are really easy to get, but good ideas are hard to find.
mhm,
But if you do it frequently enough and you're continuously searching, you'll find some hidden gems, and that's how it works, I think. But I'm not going like into New York Times and saying, "Oh, this is the number one article." Click. You can do that, and I don't think there's anything wrong in doing that either. I think that's a very good way to understand,
mhm,
what what the world thinks. Um, but a lot of the time, it's probably more even micro than that. It's like going on Twitter, seeing what's trending, going on to LinkedIn, seeing what's talked about, reading other people's work, reading other people's content, taking it in, and getting a gauge for what people think. And then through that process, it's like a mosaic effect. You with all that information and all those things that you take in, you come up with an idea, a really good idea.
Mhm.
And I guess that's literally my process. I don't have like a special algorithm. I probably should have built one that tells. Um, I try to gauge more on a qualitative basis what people emotionally care about.
Mm. I wonder, so like when you're looking at like a sea of Twitter content, maybe I live in the tech world. I feel like people's um like attention span, like although I agree with you, like there is like the thinking like long and thinking slow, like thinking short, thinking slow kind of like
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
thinking pattern, like, but I feel like on the social media, like whenever you find out about like a really popular news or whatever, it's already like by the time I create a piece of content, people are starting talking about something else. How do you like identify what would be like having the longevity of like a quote unquote trend?
Actually,
um
there's more longevity than you think. That's what I would say. So even though the trend or the conversation may shift on a topic, there is
mhm,
actually more longevity than you think because it's still in people's minds for some considerable time afterwards. So I think that you don't necessarily need to rush out with your story just because it's happened.
mhm,
Uh, you could wait, and it doesn't mean that you've missed an opportunity. You could wait a week or 2 weeks and still go out with that content, and it can still be very relevant and very well received. So it's I think longevity wise, I worry less about that.
mhm,
So if something major happens in the world, I take a
mhm,
deep breath. I cool,
mhm,
calm down. Yes, I need to create something, but I need to create the right thing. And it doesn't. If you do it correctly, it shouldn't really impact your numbers,
mhm.
um, the amount of engagement you get. Um,
I guess like how would you, so like if you're running like a financial firm right now, like or like if you're in any of your clients' position, can you talk about like how would you run the content besides the form of content that you are creating? And also can you unpack a little bit more about like, how do you code the like your graphs basically? I feel like that's
Oh,
like
okay, yeah. I mean, it's not very complicated. You can
Mhm,
there's like a million of different ways to make an animated data
mhm,
visualization. So that is not difficult to do. The technology is not what's impressive. It's the story that matters, not the tech. So
mhm,
I generally tend to use JavaScript
mhm,
to create actual data visualizations.
mhm,
I quite often use Adobe After Effects that supports
mhm,
JavaScript.
mhm,
Not all the time because it depends what I'm doing. If the data visualization is too complex, it won't work in After Effects.
mhm,
So I will literally run it natively in a browser using something like D3 or another JavaScript library. Um, and then I use Python a lot for managing data,
mhm.
like collecting data and building the data set that I need.
How do you like, so I guess like for these kind of videos, do you have to write an actual script? Like, okay, so in the first like 30 second, we're gonna run the numbers of like how much like Pepsi has sold in the first like 10 years, and then the second 10 seconds, like the second like the 20 year, then like at what point we like, are you like a director that you have to write down every like, at like 45 second we need to show up like in 9033 and like what happened, that kind of thing? Because I was like just looking at your graph, there's also the color, there's the font, and then there is like also the numbers changing, and then the graph charting, and then you also have like a written piece. Sometimes, like for example, using the US debt thing, there's like a debt past like, 1 trillion for blah 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 a period of time. So like basically how do you kind of like craft the piece of content that you are making?
It's not that complicated, to be honest
Mhm,
with you. Um, it, I think I would say that like when I go out to create something,
mhm,
um, I don't really write a script,
mhm,
playwright.
mhm,
It works slightly differently. So
mhm,
I might actually like create that data visualization first
Mhm.
to see the full story, because sometimes you need to visualize it in
Mhm.
order to understand the story. So I might go down a path like, I think there's a story here, and I created a data visualization, and then I realized there's no story. And yes, I've wasted a lot of time, but at least I know now. And then there's times where you go out there on a whim and you just discover something amazing. And then it's not that you create a script to tell it. You allow the data visualization to give you the script. That's how I would describe it. So say like Pepsi Cola. I knew that there was divergence because I ran a static chart in Excel.
Mm.
So that's an example of where you kind of know the script before you start. But
Mhm.
then there are other stories where you're not 100% sure.
Mhm.
But when you visualize it and you see the data visualization, you can see the story, and then you tell the story as the data visualization runs. So you might find yourself creating the data
Mhm.
visualization and then exploring the data visualization for the story, and then
Mhm.
creating the story behind the data visualization. And that's often what happens,
Mm.
if that makes
What
sense.
100%. I feel like that's not what I was think, but like, I think now it all makes sense. Like, sometimes the story is within the data itself. You have to kind of uncover it by like lay it out on like an Excel or something. Oh, hi, I want to say hi to your kid. But anyway, yeah. So I wonder when it comes to like, I guess like when it comes to like actually making the graph and then like actually like pulling the story out of the data, um like, I guess, like, how long does hi. Oh my god. Uh,
Right.
uh so how long does it take you to, like, create a piece of content that's, like, call it 2 minutes or so?
It really depends. So sometimes the data visualization can be really quick because I've written the code, I know what I want to say, the
Mhm,
story is really, really super clear. And other
mhm,
times it's not, it just isn't.
mhm,
And when you're in a situation where the story is unclear, there's always an element of risk that it may lead to nothing, nowhere. And that's part of the fun, actually, I would say. It's that risk. You're going on a journey and you may not get to the destination. And sometimes you have to be brave and just stop and say, this is going the wrong way. I'm heading the
mm,
wrong direction. And I've done all this work and this is not going to work.
mhm,
And that's hard, but it's also exhilarating
mhm,
and exciting because sometimes you're taking a risk and you're going down this journey and you're discovering, wait, this data visualization is going to be absolutely amazing, or this data visualization, I need to stop now and go back. So
mm,
there are times where the data visualization is really obvious and you can blast it out in not 2 minutes, but in a couple of hours. Like you've got the code written, you can just plug in the data, build the data set, boom, done. So classic example. What happened? When was it? Was it last week? Nvidia
mhm.
overtook Microsoft. Yeah, so Nvidia overtook Microsoft to become the
The
world's largest company.
mhm,
Everyone knew it was going to happen. We all
mhm,
knew it was going to happen. It was
mhm,
just a matter of time. And then once it happened, we knew that it was going to be a big story.
mhm,
And all the major news outlets, what they do when there's a big breaking story like that, they put out like a junky article just stating the obvious, and that's literally what what they do.
mhm,
Uh, and when that broke, it was literally I've got I've got some code in Python. I go in, go tap into I've written a code that gets me um, the 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 market cap time series data for any stock I want. So I use that to build the data set. That took me literally a minute because I just literally typed in the ticket, typed in the time frame, bang, I've got the data. Then I've got the code already that I've written. Like I'm not even going into After Effects. I'm just doing it raw JavaScript. I've got plug in the data, link it to the data set, change the title, do it all up, get a nice soundtrack, and I'm out in 2-3 hours max, or actually I think it was 2 hours. So that's an example where you kind of know the story's going to work, and that's fast. I mean, it's not the most exhilarating data story because you're not doing any discovery. The discovery's
mhm,
already been done. But that's an example of a fast paced, like get it out there. It's a great story piece. And then there are others where you're kind of like stumbling across, and then I did one on US healthcare. So I just assume, yeah, US healthcare is expensive. We all know that, right? But I live in Switzerland. Healthcare is pretty expensive here. But what I didn't realize is that it's even more expensive in the US. Like it's almost like 3 times more expensive. And in fact, the US is more expensive than anywhere else in the world. And when you actually see it visually, it's shocking how expensive US healthcare is. And that was something I stumbled across just messing around with the data. And then something like that would take longer because you've got this whole exploration process that you're going through, trying to find out the story. And then something like that may take a few days to do. And then there's times where you just can't get the data, or the data is very hard to get, and you're searching in academic records. Like there's one where I did reserve currencies since the 1850s. And literally I was piecing together, going through academic studies to find out the level of reserve currencies in, say, 1914, which is really hard to do. And that was a project several weeks to do. Of course, I did things in between, but you see the longevity changes. It depends on the story, what you're doing, and that has an impact.
I have a couple questions there. Like you mentioned that you would, so I guess like for JavaScript, what is that? Is that like just like you code, like you put in the data as like the number of like this is the final number, or like do you have to collect like each year's data for let's say I'm just like watching the NVIDIA Apple thing. So like, do you have to collect every single year? Like, what does it look like?
All
Or
right.
do you
So
have
if I'm collecting data, I'm not going to use JavaScript. I'll use something like Python. So that's what I used in that instance. I don't always use Python. The actual technology doesn't matter. You use what tools that you need for that particular project. So in this instance, I wanted Python because I can get lots of data really quickly in an organized way, the way that I want it, which is far faster than if you try to do this, I don't know, in Excel. Like literally, I'm just pressing a button and I'm getting the data I need. So JavaScript is I would say that when you look at these coding languages, they all have their benefits. They all do things in a different way. So if you go, say, for example, to an insurance company, you'll often find, or a quant house, you'll often find them using a language called R, because it's a nice, it's an incredibly powerful language, really quite elegant and fast when it comes to testing statistical ideas and models and null hypotheses. And something like R, you could run a Monte Carlo simulation with millions and millions of iterations or something to find a pattern or a trend. So it has its purpose. That's what it does. It's used by statisticians to find patterns and understand, build models, and etc. etc. But then, if I'm like, I might not want to do that. Maybe my goal is to get data and manage data. So I might use Python. And Python is a lovely language because it's really, really easy to learn and pick up. And it helps. It's really easy to be. What I like about Python is that you can really quickly grab data off the internet, sort it out in a way that's usable, and it's just so fast. It's so powerful. It's like a tool. But you could do that in Excel, and you could do that in, I don't know, Tableau maybe. What you need to decide is which one is the best tech for what I'm trying to do here. And then JavaScript, I use it for data visualization to actually create the data visualization because it's such a resilient code. So you can do absolutely insanely crazy things in JavaScript that make no sense and will just work. So because it's such an old language and such a versatile language, it's confusing, it's hard to learn, but it's also incredibly flexible. So that flexibility allows you to create things that you wouldn't normally be able to create in other coding languages. And so that's why I use JavaScript. And also with JavaScript, I can run it natively in a browser at breathtaking speed. And that's another kind of really useful aspect of using JavaScript to actually create the data visualization. So I would say that JavaScript, in whatever form it is, I might be using After Effects and JavaScript, or I might be doing it just in JavaScript, is really good at creating data visualizations. Things like Python, on the other hand, are really good at allowing you to manage data, collect data, sort it out, and then tools like Power BI, was it Power BI or Tableau or Excel? Really, they're also pretty good, powerful tools as well, and you can use them to explore data and understand big data sets.
Mm. I wonder, so when you are thinking about like yourself as the vision for your own business, obviously you're making a lot of amazing content on day to day. Um, I guess like what would be your core learnings like throughout the 6 years of like going on your own entrepreneurial journey in the data visualization space? And then what are some technology or even just like general trend that you're seeing that you feel like as a tech investor, people should really deploy more capital into?
Right. So I would say this. There's two parts to this question. If you want to know how I started from here to there, it was
Mhm,
a zigzag journey. I literally remember when I first started out, I got myself a laptop.
mhm,
I went to a co-working place. I sat down there, and I thought, well, I work in finance. I'm going to be the world's best entrepreneur.
mhm,
And then I quickly learned that I knew absolutely nothing. I had no idea what I was doing,
mhm,
like because I'd been a salarized employee for years,
mhm,
and so that was the learning curve, going zigzaggy, like
mhm.
learning by experimentation. Um, and then the other part of your question about what was it? What technology do you see changing the world,
Well, so
where do
in
you
the data
what
realm,
see it?
and then like in the finance data realm, like I guess like what are some like trends that you're seeing people like,
So
obviously you're a great like data visualization specialist. What are some other content that you consume that you feel like it's really good?
okay,
That's
so
like, yeah.
I think that for me, the real problem that I run up is that the technology just isn't good enough right now. Like the
Mm,
technology is bad in data
mhm,
visualization. You do have it's not accessible enough. So if you want to create data visualization, you just can't really do it
yeah.
easily in a
Yeah.
like if you want to create a graph, you could go to Excel,
Mhm,
write a table of data. It's logical. It makes sense.
mhm,
And then there's a little. It's like a graph wizard.
mhm,
You highlight the data, click a button, and you've got a chart. And
mhm,
data visualization should be like that. But the
mhm,
problem is the technology is not there yet. It's just not powerful enough.
mhm,
And even in the JavaScript packages, they're just not powerful enough to actually deliver um, 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 really kind of beautiful data visualizations that everyone deserves to have in their lives. And so I think that the trend would be um, multiple. I think AI is a very big part of that journey. So I believe that no one should have to code to create data visualization. Coding
exactly.
be
We
more
need the no code
yeah,
version
no
of
code.
this.
So like literally you just say, I want to see how many ships are leaving Shanghai yesterday,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
just write it, and then you press a button, and then suddenly you see on your screen ships moving across a map. That's what people want to see. They don't
mhm,
want to go around searching around for data
mhm,
and then coding in JavaScript, which is a nightmare of a language to learn, coding language to learn because it's so old and so convoluted, and it's like a Frankenstein coding language.
yeah.
Really, that's what makes it powerful, but it's also not very user friendly to learn. But AI doesn't care about that. If you have an AI application that can do that for you, it makes things much easier. And I think really, if we want to democratize data, if we want to allow people to understand this data rich world that we're living in, you need to democratize data visualization. The big problem we have right now is that we have too much data. We're creating too much data, and there's absolutely no visibility in the world, and it's incredibly dangerous.
Mhm,
Um, the problem that we have is that because of that, there is much more chance for misinformation, for people making poor decisions. So, people fart out tweets on X without thinking. There are far-reaching consequences to not being able to cognitively understand the world you're in right now. And data visualization breaks down that barrier by allowing you to see things more easily.
mhm.
But to do that, we need better tech. We need something that kind of democratizes data visualization to the masses.
I completely agree with you. We
I
need
just
like
don't know if that's a trend though. That's the thing.
yeah,
I want that to be a trend,
yeah.
but I'm not
We
seeing enough.
we need like a Canva for like data visualization because I feel like it's so hard to actually make these. Like, I mean, as a content creator, I feel like even the editing tool for like a podcast is like a freaking
It's
nightmare.
really annoying to use,
It's
right?
annoying. It's like
Click.
not good enough. Yeah, it's we need like a one click and then this is good to go kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like so hard to find right now. And I wonder for like I guess like the last part I want to touch on is like what's your content diet look like? You mentioned about a lot of Twitter. Um, like where do you even find like important information on Twitter? I feel like Twitter just like so much noise and then there's so much meme going on. Like and then the meme is kind of like I would identify maybe like half of it are like personal like memes about like a specific niche industry or like a people's feeling towards San Francisco that are like I
Yeah,
don't know, it's
you have
bad.
to understand why memes
Oh,
exist, right? Memes.
another question I wanna ask you is, like, I feel like I had some, like, okay performing content, but I think to go to, like, the viral state of, like, which I feel like you are in, like, having, like, like, 100K people, like, likes your stuff or whatever, like, I feel like I wonder, like, how do you really get there? Like, what's the difference between, like, when you got, like, 500 likes versus, like, 10K likes or, like, 20K likes? What do you feel um, like you were doing right to kind of, like, hit the algo?
To be honest with you, I would say that this is something that you have to take a step back.
Mhm,
One of the big problems we do as human beings is we tend to associate luck with skill,
mhm,
and sometimes something can go viral. Not necessarily. I mean, there is skill involved,
mhm,
but sometimes it can go viral almost by chance.
mhm,
You just got people at the right time at the right day, and for whatever reason, it just snowballs and takes off. And so I think you shouldn't focus too much on whether or not the post will go viral. What you should focus on is whether or not the post will be enjoyed by whoever's viewing it. That should be where you start. And sometimes there are posts that you produce that are brilliant that may not get the same level of engagement as possible because you accidentally posted it on July 4th or something. It's just the way it is. Um, and yeah, of course, timing matters, but I think you have to also appreciate that there is also an element of luck and chance involved. But what I would say is that you need to play to win, right? So if you need to create your own luck, and if you're not creating enough content and you're not consistent in the amount of content you produce, um, it's not just a skill thing. You're not going to get lucky with
mhm,
something. You're not going to discover something. So
mhm,
part of repeating, producing, and trying and experimenting is that occasionally you'll discover a way to do something. You may discover 100 ways not to make a light bulb until you get lucky.
mhm,
That's just the way it works, and it's the same with content. You'll discover 100 ways not to make content before you find the right way to make content, and or the right way for a particular audience. And
mhm,
so that's the first thing I would do. And then the second thing, just it honestly, right? If you could produce a piece of content that is only viewed by 10 people and one person gives you a huge business mandate, I
mhm,
would say that 10-person viewed content is could potentially be more lucrative and powerful to you than a piece of content that went viral. So it's not, you shouldn't measure virility as a yardstick for success.
mhm,
That should never be the case. You should look whether or not you've reached a target audience, you've made the right connections to the right people, and that you've learned something from it. So if you've learned that the post wasn't very good, you can take that away to make a better post another time. And that's literally my strategy and what I do.
do you feel like the growth, comes similar, for you on LinkedIn versus, like, Twitter and other, like, IG or
Yeah, I mean,
something
they're different
platform?
platforms. They're different platforms. So I don't make much money on something like Twitter or Instagram,
Mhm,
um, or even Reddit. I mean, Reddit was a favorite of mine for a very long time.
Mhm.
But I think the difference is that people go to LinkedIn to do business and to have
Mhm.
serious conversations. So the
Mhm.
serious conversations happen on LinkedIn. That's just the truth. Like you've got very smart, intelligent people who don't use any other social platform, but
Mhm.
LinkedIn, because they're professionals and they don't have time for social media generally.
Mhm.
So what I like about LinkedIn is that you get real conversations going, real proper conversations going. And I think something like Twitter or X, whatever you call it now, or Instagram or Facebook, they're also great, or TikTok, fantastic platforms. But people go there for entertainment. They don't go there to
Mhm.
have debate. So often they want to just consume a fantastic dance video or a kitty cat video just for pleasure. They don't
Mhm.
actually think about where the content comes from. They don't think about who the content creator was, and they don't really feel like they don't necessarily have a desire to talk to the content creator. So it's a very, very different type of content, and it's a very different type of platform. While on LinkedIn, they will contact you if they love your work and they
Mhm.
want to connect with you physically because they want to talk to you about what you've created. And I think
Mhm.
that's probably the difference between the two.
Mhm.
Um,
For sure. We're at the end of the interview. Let's like chat about like let's do like a 1 minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
my favorite what? My favorite
Or
book.
yeah.
Oh gosh. Um, Thinking Fast and Slow was one of my favorite books. I've got a few actually, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
Fall by Randomness by Nassim Taleb as well. That was one of my
Mhm.
favorites. I think those two. I don't know if you heard of them, but those are probably my favorite books.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My biggest impact in my career,
Mhm.
discovering data visualization, probably. Oh no, it's what I told you earlier on. Realizing that I was a terrible writer. That was the biggest impact in my career. That was my
Uh,
pivot.
who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I like to have a party with?
Yeah.
Randomly, probably Elon Musk. I think he's quite an interesting guy. A bit unusual.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Where can I find my what?
Outside of work.
Where can you find me outside of work? Probably cycling home or cycling to work. So that's a new thing I've been doing.
Going to work.
So I've been cycling like about 42 kilometers or 26 miles in old currency to and fro work. That's my kind of new routine. I go to the gym. I play paddle. I've got kids, so I'm up in the mountains, swimming in lakes. I mean, I live in Switzerland, um, and yeah, you'll find me generally. I'm quite an active person, generally speaking. So I'm usually running up and down mountains and doing crazy things with kids. And yeah.
I feel you. Amazing. Well, James, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Grace.
let me quickly